West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Dr. Fauci, thank you so much for being with us. A lot to get to, and now we want to talk about children and the start of school. I just want to pull back a little bit about where this virus could go. I'm hearing anecdotally through people I know about breakthrough cases that are really serious, that end up with people being on ventilators. These are people who are vaccinated but still got COVID. What is the potential that this spirals beyond Delta to monster variant?
Well, there's always a risk of, as you get more circulation of virus in the community, that you'll get enough accumulation of new mutations to get a variant that is functionally different than the ones we're seeing now. Delta has the capability, unlike Alpha, of transmitting extraordinarily readily and efficiently from person to person. That is the reason why we've seen that surge that we've been through over the last few months, where we went from 11,000 cases a day up to 150, 160,000 cases a day. One of the reasons why we want to make sure we get as many people vaccinated as we possibly can is that viruses will not mutate if they don't have the opportunity to spread and replicate. So the more dynamics of viral activity you have in the community, the greater opportunity you give to the virus to mutate. So it's one of those things that you're vaccinating now to prevent the next mutant coming, the next variant from coming. And again, that's yet again another reason, besides protecting the health of the people who are getting vaccinated, protecting the community, you don't want to see more variants come in, because then it would, in many respects, negate some of the very positive protection that you get from the vaccines.
Isn't it always also about protecting our children under 12 who still can't get the vaccine? The Delta can spread among children. The transmissibility, as you just said, is far worse than the first phase of COVID. It really, it spreads quickly, and it's an incredibly terrible experience if it's survivable. How do we address this with children going to school, even if they're wearing masks? Is that enough at the rate we're going?
Well, you just said something that is really one of the fundamental principles of vaccine protection of the community. When you have vulnerable people who either are not yet eligible for vaccines, the way many of our children, 11 years old and younger, who are in the school system, they are vulnerable. The way you protect the vulnerable is to surround them by people who are vaccinated, be they teachers, personnel in the school, students in the school who are old enough to get vaccinated. For example, those who are 12 years old and older. That is a fundamental public health principle of how you protect vulnerable people, is you surround them with vaccinated people.
Dr. Fauci, it's Willie Geist. Good morning. I want to ask you about boosters. There was that new study that came out yesterday, I'm sure you saw, published in the peer-reviewed Lancet from public health experts here in America and around the world that said boosters at this time for otherwise healthy people are not necessary. And in fact, they went so far as to say it may be unethical given the fact that so many places in the world still need all these doses of the vaccine. So what is your position on boosters right now? Should healthy people, not people who are at risk, who do need the boosters, but should otherwise healthy people be getting the booster?
Yeah, Willie, that's a great question. And with regard to that article, that's a controversial article that I actually disagree mostly with. There are a couple of aspects that get conflated in that article. Certainly, if you have countries, low and middle income countries that don't have any vaccine, and you make no attempt to get them vaccine and only focus on boosting individuals who are in your own country, that is not the right thing, and I disagree with that. However, you can do both the way we're doing in this country. You can have a program to give booster, in this case, third shots for people who've gotten the 2-dose Moderna and Pfizer vaccine. You can get them boosted if you put a considerable amount of resources and effort into getting low and middle income people vaccinated. And that's exactly what we're doing. I don't have the time or you to go over all the things that are being done, but they are being done. So don't conflate those two. Once you separate those two and say, okay, let's look at now the rationale. If you look at the data are strongly suggestive in this country, and more than just suggestive in Israel, that you have a waning of immunity among people across age groups, not just the very, very elderly. You have clearly waning of immunity against infection and clear-cut indication of waning of immunity against severe disease. So what we're trying to do right now is have a plan that by the time we get to the middle of September, the week of September the 20th, we will have a plan to vaccinate people who are having that waning immunity. The part about that plan that's important, it will be contingent upon the FDA analyzing the data, not only from the United States, but from Israel and other countries, to determine if it's appropriate and scientifically sound to do it. So when you have people objecting to the plan to do it, they tend to leave out that nothing is going to get done until the FDA analyzes the data very, very carefully the way they do and make a determination from a regulatory standpoint of should we be giving the boosters. Myself, as a scientist who have seen some of the data, I believe when you look at that data carefully, there's going to be a decision to actually give the boost as opposed to not giving it.
Okay, that's interesting. That document, that article got a lot of attention yesterday. Interesting to hear you contradict it there point by point. Dr. Fauci, apologies for a question you've answered so many times over the last year, but I think it needs to be driven home. I know so many otherwise rational, smart people I know that I talk to who say, I'm healthy, I'm this age, I've never been sick, I don't need to get the vaccine. What do you say to those people? What is the clear case that you make to people who just don't think, they're not reading crazy conspiracy theories even. They just think, I don't want to put this in my body because I don't need to. What do you say to them?
Well, there are two aspects of that and two approaches you take. First of all, the personal approach. It is true that young, healthy people have less of a chance of getting severely involved in the sense of getting infected and have a severe outcome. There's no doubt about that. But if you look across the country and you look at the hospitals, you see there are plenty of young people who get severely ill. We've had 650,000 deaths in the United States. So although the odds are in your favor, you are not completely exempt from getting seriously ill. That's one component. The other component that in many respects is equally important is that it isn't all about you. If you get infected, even if you don't have any symptoms, it is likely that you will pass the virus on to someone else, who might pass it on to someone else, who might have a severe outcome leading to hospitalization and even death. So you've got to look at it that you're not in a vacuum. You're part of society. And do you want to be part of the component that propagates the virus and propagates the outbreak? Or do you want to be part of the solution? So, A, you should be worried about yourself because your health is important, as is the health of your family. But you are a part of society, and you do have some responsibility as a member of society.
Dr. Fauci, the back and forth you just had with Willie was both interesting and informative, as usual. My question is one that I think is on the minds of a lot of Americans, and it is this. Is this, the fight against this virus, our real forever war?
I don't believe it needs to be. I mean, obviously, we will always be challenged by emerging and re-emerging infections. We have very good vaccines right now. The virus will mutate and get new variants if we allow it to circulate and propagate itself. And that's one of the reasons why, when you do have the capability of really smashing this virus, let's do it. And if we do it, and I believe we can and will do it, you don't necessarily have to look at the fact that you're going to be struggling with this virus indefinitely. We've had formidable viruses that we've eliminated. Things like polio, things like measles in this country. We can do it if we put our will and all of our resources, which we are doing, to do that. And I'm not only talking about the United States, I'm talking about getting the world vaccinated within a reasonable period of time.
Dr. Fauci, we know that the virus travels when people move around the country. Don Bayer, the Democratic congressman from Virginia, has a bill proposing that people traveling within the United States on airplanes and trains should either be vaccinated or provide proof of a negative COVID test. This is very common practice now in Europe. I've just been traveling all over Europe. You can't get on a plane without having some kind of proof that you're negative. It seems to me crazy that a year and a half into this, I can still get on a plane to Boston or California and nobody's going to check me. Do you think that needs to change?
Well, that's under consideration, certainly. I mean, I have been asked that question, and it actually got some play in the press when I made the answer. I think that if, in fact, it is seriously considered, it's on the table, we're not there yet. In fact, if you look at the 6-point program that the president came out with a couple of days, what we were talking about with travel was doubling the fines of people who, in fact, are traveling and don't get tested. And I believe that the idea about requiring vaccination for travel is something that is on the table for discussion. It has not been decided yet.
It is Friday, the 24th of September of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and we are almost back from COVID. Yes, indeed. For those of you who might not know, we haven't had a show this whole week because I did contract, not that I contracted COVID. Apparently, I tested on last Friday. Was feeling a little sick last Thursday night. Got a headache. And the next day, my mom and I were both very sick. And my sister, the nurse, came over. She was fully clothed in a hazmat suit, by the way. Gloves and all. And she drove us to get tested. My mom and I got tested at different spots because we have different doctors, but in the same area just around the corner. My mom's test came back positive last Friday, fairly quick. Mine took until Sunday to come back positive. But when my mom tested positive, it was, fairly obvious that I had it as well. Now, my mom was, she got kind of sick initially. She's 84, but it got worse and worse. And now all my days are messed up because it has been a blur. But I believe Sunday, was it Sunday or Monday? Regardless, She got exceedingly sick. Her vitals started to crash. I wasn't so bad that I couldn't, take care of my mom. And so we keep track of her oxygen levels on a regular basis, as well as blood pressure and everything else. So she was doing so well, and it might have been on Monday because it was a very nice day, beautiful out. She got up and had a bowl of cereal and was standing up and walking around, which we wanted her to do. My sister said it was important to get up so that you don't have anything collecting in your lungs. Doing deep breathing exercises, breathe deep, slowly in, and, exhale slowly out. And try to just, fill up your lungs and don't let anything collect, because that's how you get COVID pneumonia. Well, Mom's oxygen levels were just fine, and we had a windstorm, and so there was a little bit of things to pick up and, tie back together. So I just went outside for a few minutes and came back in, and my mom was calling me. And I said, "What?" I go, "Mom, I'm just, it's the first time I've been out to be able to fix stuff." And I looked at her, and she was just a little confused. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "My oxygen levels are 86 or 88 by 100. And, that's the opposite of what it should be. It should be like, 96, 97, and, 88. But I didn't believe it. I thought maybe the machine was wrong, and she showed it to me. Fortunately, she had called my sister because she didn't know that I had gone out just for a minute. And that's how fast it can happen. And I told my sister, I didn't realize, that she was starting to crash. And she said she didn't either. It just happened just now while she was on the phone with my mom. So I immediately called 911. They came, fully hazmated as well, I should mention, and took my mom to the doctors. And whereupon then she had a heart attack, and it didn't look good. So, as you can probably tell, since I'm speaking in the past tense, things have transpired more for the positive, but it was a very frightening experience to have your mom almost die on you. So where did we get this virus? Well, I suspect that it was probably at the emergency room the last time I had to take my mom in, which was within the gestation period of the virus. Whereupon we had stayed at the ER for about 12 hours. My mom had some blood pressure spikes that were quite serious. And I didn't want to wait around even for the ambulance, so I took her straight to ER. Well, when we got there, her blood pressure kind of stabilized and stayed that way. But because she had been in previous from her blood pressure dropping perilously low, not very long before that, the spikes up were a bit of a concern. So I should let you know, I have my mom's little Yorkie Poo, Ginger, in the room because she has some separation anxiety. I don't have a position for her in the salon like I do with Gunner. But she's an old gal and has a little bit of congestive heart problems, so we let her wheeze and try to keep her calm. She's a good old dog. Little thing. Compared to Gunner. Anyway, so we think that possibly the extended period of time in a cesspool of virus. Why do I say that? Because in this part of Southern Oregon, or should I say Oregon, in the Grants Pass area is a hotbed. The whole area is a hotbed of anti-vaxxers, but apparently Grants Pass is the hottest hotbed. When we had to go to the ER, we had to traverse through a gauntlet of anti-vaxxers mocking us for wearing a mask. My mom's an old woman in a wheelchair. I'm wheeling her in on a wheelchair, and they're mocking us. Then we get in there, and we finally get back into the examination area, with the little, curtains around your bed. Lots of privacy. Isolated, too. And there are people in there arguing with the doctors and the nurses that the doctors and the nurses are Nazis and all this other BS because they want to get people well. And I got to tell you, this one doctor was getting kind of pissed. Because, pardon me, it is up to the patient to decide how they want to be cared for, ultimately. But this doctor wasn't having it anymore. Good for him. But my mom and I both looked at each other and said, oops, we probably were in the wrong space on the wrong day. And that may be so. Now, of course, it could just as easily been briefly going to the store. I try not to be in any enclosed areas for more than 15 minutes. That was another thing. So being at ER for 12 hours, that was, you're just upping the chances. But it could have easily been that we got the virus by going to a quick store run, picking up an item that someone else had put down who had been infected, and then touch our nose or eye or whatever. Especially with the variant. The variants. Because those are more easily transmittable, even. So, I was feeling pretty bad, and I couldn't really even do a show. Though I have to tell you that because of my age apparently, because I am 66, I qualified for the monoclonal antibody treatment. It's still being tested, and we are, who have taken it, the test subjects. But I got it on, what day is this? Friday? Yeah, I got it on Wednesday. And I was feeling a little tired yesterday. Wednesday I came back, I was still feeling, okay. Takes a little bit. So then yesterday, Thursday, I was still feeling a little bit fatigued. I did, since I should mention, my mom has rallied and stable after this heart attack, which turned out to be a stress heart attack, I should mention. I know I'm jumping around because I'm trying to keep some sort of linear aspect to this story. And I forgot an integral part, and that's Mom recovering somewhat. She's not out of the woods. I mean, she's got some time, even when she gets back home. And yeah, she will be coming home, not in a few days, not in probably a few days, I should say. So, she had what the doctors called a stress heart attack because she was stressed. She's 84 years old, didn't know what's going on. So, and she went septic. That was the other problem. It was very touch and go because of that. So they filled her up with an antibacterial cocktail. They got to adjust it and stuff. It took a little bit of time to get the right ratios there. But with a heart attack was the issue for them because they couldn't balance her heart rate with her blood pressure. One would go up, the other go down, vice versa. Well, they finally were able to stabilize that. And apparently her white blood cell count is up. She's taking in oxygen at about 96. That's good. Well, my sister, the nurse, said that she was on almost 4 liters of oxygen, and she's down to a little less than 1 now. That's big progress. So the word is that they anticipate moving her into a regular room in a few days. And then maybe not too much after that, she'll be able to come home. So with that in mind, of course, we thought that maybe she might come home a little bit sooner before I got my Regeneron shots. Realized it might take a few days longer than initially anticipated, which is good. We don't want Mom to have a relapse of anything. So, yes, I got the monoclonal antibody treatment, which consists of 4 shots, 4 needles in your abdomen. And I was afraid it was going to be like a rabies needle. Have you ever seen those? You don't want to be poked with any of those. That's why you don't want to get rabies. You see that needle and you go, I am not getting rabies. And they assured me, no, it's more like, like a diabetic type prick, of a needle. So it's not a big deal. And it wasn't. Didn't even feel it. But, as I get back to the part of, feeling, a little punk still after getting the shot, the monoclonal antibody treatment, Regeneron to be specific. So yesterday felt a bit fatigued towards the end of the day. Yeah. I mean, when I say end of the day, about 9 o'clock at night, I'm usually still working. And, working on the station, getting the show ready, that kind of thing. So the same sort of fatigue set in. I did try to clean the house, knowing that Mom's coming back. So I have to super fun clean this house. That's what I call it. It's a super fun site. So I needed to get the carpets vacuumed, what few we have left in some bedrooms, and mop all the floors. Well, I got all of the house vacuumed, but I was just too tired to mop the floors. So I anticipate being able to do that today. I actually feel much better today. A little bit of catch in my throat, as you can probably tell, but nothing debilitating. And I don't think I'm shedding, though my quarantine will be up on the 27th Monday. And I have not had a fever. I've not been taking any acetaminophen to reduce fever for several days now. And part of the protocol on getting off of quarantine is not having a fever for 24 hours. And in that time, not taking any fever reducers. So I got that going for me, which is nice. One thing that is a bit of a concern is in the construct of this show, I have certain, production conceits that I do. And one of those are the clips at the top. And also just generally for the show, I'm grabbing clips from MSNBC, CNN, whatnot. And I have to convert them into, those would be on YouTube. I convert them into MP3s. And then I can use that audio file to plug into the broadcaster or put in within the context of this show. Or, that's how we do it. Well, unfortunately, while I was sick, my free online YouTube converter went kaput. So I don't know if they went out of business or what. But one doesn't just go out in the world and go, I'm going to use this free online YouTube converter. You might get a bug. Not COVID, but something worse. Yeah, so you have to be a bit careful. And it took me a bit of research a few years ago to get the YouTube converter that I was using to replace the one before that started clamping down. You couldn't have... You used to be able to get an hour, then there was like 10 minutes. What? Because there were some things that were shows, like, we have content here that we use YouTube to grab from. So that's how some folks have their content. It's never been an issue. Well, now I have to go out in the world and find another YouTube converter, damn them. So our clip with Fauci at the top was actually an old clip that I had from last week that I thought, I'd use again because it is, quite pertinent because unvaccinated people can get ill. And the unvaccinated people are still blaming everybody else for these spikes in people getting infected, like my elderly mom. And as far as I'm concerned, those people are accomplices to murder. And I will be lobbying in this state to make the dissemination of medical disinformation a crime. No, there is no First Amendment right to spread medical disinfo when the medical disinformation itself has become a public health crisis. The Constitution of the United States does not give you a First Amendment right to do that. I don't care how many of you anti-vaxxers out there think that you have a constitutional right to just tell people to take poison. You can't yell fire in a crowded theater and have people trample each other to death and get away. You cannot get away with it. You don't have a First Amendment right to do that. You also don't have a First Amendment right to tell somebody to kill themselves. Hell, a teenage girl just is in jail now for convincing her, quote, boyfriend to kill himself, and he did. So don't give me this BS that the Constitution grants you some First Amendment right to do that. We're not playing anymore. You tried to kill my mom. And now you're saying, oh no, you did it yourselves. No, we're not going to put up with it anymore. You're going to lie. You're going to be ignorant. You will pay the price, not the rest of us. We're done. Well, looks like the day's just speeding by. I better get into what we have actually curated, because we actually curated a show for you today, in spite of not being quite back from COVID. What's on the rest of the menu? Well, 4 extreme right-wing members of the California militia Boogaloo Bois have pled guilty to conspiracy to kill cops and blame it on Antifa. You know those guys. The EPA has ruled that domestic production of refrigerator gases are sharply limited, or be sharply limited, somewhere like that, something like that. And the oldest human footprints in North America have been found in New Mexico. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where with so many drug lords to deal with, questions arise why the Mexican government locked up 31 academics, professors, and scientists in the country's harshest maximum security prison. And slowing lava spread 50 feet high in some places has raised fears of even more damage on the Canary Islands. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be at Netroots Nation virtually this year, so stay tuned for that. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link, across the page at our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it would be very helpful, especially now. And the bills keep going up. So if you could afford an espresso-type coffee drink and send those funds our way once a month, we'll stretch those dollars, we'll pay our bills, and we will continue resisting as the founders originally intended. And we thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty, which we take quite seriously. We do indeed. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that and a hell of a whole lot more. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press by staff of the Associated Press. 4 members of an alleged California militia group, they're not alleged, we know who they are, have pleaded guilty to conspiring to obstruct justice in the case of a federal guard who was fatally shot in Oakland more than a year ago, federal prosecutors said. The men, followers of the Boogaloo movement, a concept embraced by a loose network of gun enthusiasts and militia-style extremists, they're not liberals. Let's make that clear. Are accused of conspiring to destroy communications and other records about the May 29, 2020 killing of a federal security officer, David Patrick Underwood, and attempted murder of his partner by one of their members. Underwood was fatally shot, and his partner was shot and wounded as they guarded the Ronald V. Dellums Federal Building in Oakland, California, while a large demonstration over the police killing of George Floyd was underway nearby. Prosecutors have accused a 5th alleged member of the group of opening fire. In April, a federal grand jury indicted Jesse Alexander Rush, age 29 of Turlock, Robert Jesus Blancas, age 33 of Castro Valley, Simon Sage Ibarra, 23 of Los Gatos, and Kenny Matthew Mix, age 21 of San Lorenzo, on charges of conspiracy to obstruct justice. Mikish last Monday became the 4th member of the so-called Grizzly Scouts to plead guilty to conspiring to obstruct justice. And Rush and Ibarra pleaded guilty to a single charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice last week and Blancas last month. All 4 face up to 20 years in prison and a fine of $250,000 and are scheduled to be sentenced starting in December. Blancas, the only defendant who remains jailed, figure that one out, also pleaded guilty to a child enticement charge after federal prosecutors said they discovered dozens of pornographic photos and videos of a 15-year-old during the investigation. The officers were shot, get this, they are accomplices to murder and they obstructed justice, and 3 of them are walking free right now. They're not black, obviously. The officers were shot on May 29th of 2020. Prosecutors said Air Force Staff Sergeant Stephen Carrillo, age 32, fatally shot Underwood and wounded his partner. They said Carrillo used the protest as cover for the crime and for his escape because they're trying to blame it on Antifa, right? Black Bloc. They said Carrillo used the protest as cover for the crime and for his escape. Carrillo has pleaded not guilty, and the Air Force did not immediately respond yesterday to an email request for comment on whether he is still in the force. Carrillo was arrested after the June 6, 2020 killing of Santa Cruz Sheriff Sergeant Damon Gertzwiller in an ambush in the community of Ben Lamont. Carrillo has also pleaded not guilty to that officer's killing. Matthew Daly of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays almost back from COVID. In what officials call a key step to combat climate change, the Environmental Protection Agency is sharply limiting domestic production and use of hydrofluorocarbons, which we all know are highly potent greenhouse gases commonly used in refrigerators and air conditioners. The new rule, announced yesterday, Thursday, follows through on a law Congress passed last year and is intended to decrease U.S. production and use of HFCs by 85% over the next 15 years, part of a global phase-out designed to slow global warming. The administration also is taking steps to crack down on imports of HFCs, greenhouse gases that are thousands of times more powerful than carbon dioxide. They often leak through pipes or appliances that use compressed refrigerants and are considered a major driver of global warming. White House climate advisor Gina McCarthy, a former EPA administrator, said the new rule was a win on climate and a win on jobs and American competitiveness. It's really, frankly, folks, a very big deal, she said. The rule, set to take effect in late October, is expected to reduce harmful emissions by the equivalent of 4.5 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide by 2050. McCarthy said a total similar to 3 years of emissions from the U.S. power sector. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan said the phase-down is backed by a coalition of industry groups that see it as an opportunity to supercharge American leadership on domestic manufacturing and production of alternative refrigerants. The industry has long been shifting to the use of alternative refrigerants and pushed for a federal standard to avoid a patchwork of state laws and regulations. Larson of the Associated Press brings us this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Fossilized footprints discovered in New Mexico indicate that early humans were walking across North America about 23,000 years ago. The first footprints were found in a dry lake bed in White Sands National Park in 2009. Scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey recently analyzed seeds stuck in the footprints to determine their approximate age, ranging from around 22,800 years and 21,130 years ago. The findings may shed light on a mystery that has long intrigued scientists. When did people first arrive in the Americas after dispersing from Africa and Asia? Most scientists believe ancient migration came by way of the now submerged lake land bridge that connected Asia to Alaska, based on various evidences, including stone tools, fossil bones, and genetic analysis. Other researchers have offered a range of possible dates for human arrival in the Americas from 13,000 to 26,000 years ago or more. The current study provides a more solid baseline for when humans definitely were in North America, although they could have arrived even earlier, the authors say. Fossil footprints are more indisputable and direct evidence that cultural artifacts, modified bones, or other more conventional fossils, they wrote in the journal Science, which published the study yesterday, Thursday. What we present here is evidence of a firm time and location, they said. Based on the size of the footprints, researchers believe at least some were made by children and teenagers who lived during the last ice age. David Bustos, the park's resource program manager, spotted the first footprints in ancient wetlands in 2009. He and others found more in the park over the years. Made of fine silt and clay, the footprints are fragile, so the researchers had to work quickly to gather samples. The only way we can save them is to record them, to take a lot of photos and make 3D models, he said. Earlier excavations in White Sands National Park have uncovered fossilized tracks left by a saber-toothed cat. a dire wolf, Columbian mammoth, and other Ice Age mammals. Interesting. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You were listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
When Donald Trump declared he would fix the U.S. Postal Service, he was using the word fix the same way veterinarians do when you bring in your dog. Trump wasted an inordinate amount of his presidential power and prestige in a failed attempt to neuter an agency that literally delivers for the people. Extraordinary postal workers move our letters and packages by truck, car, airplane, boat, motorbike, mule, and of course by foot, to any address across town or across the country. Both essential and effective, it's the most popular federal agency, with 91% of the public approving its work. Thus, an uproar of protest killed Trump's attempt to gut it. When it comes to bad public policy, however, failure is just a way of saying, let's try the back door. Trump was defeated, but he left behind an undistinguished Postmaster General named Louis DeJoy, who had only 2 qualifications for the job. He was a Trump mega-donor, and he was a peer of corporate powers that have long wanted to privatize the Postal Service. In March, before the new Biden presidency had taken charge of the postal system, DeJoy popped through the back door with his own 10-year plan to fix the agency. Rhetorically, his plan promised to, quote, achieve service excellence by making mail delivery more consistent and reliable. How? By consistently cutting service and reliably gouging customers. Specifically, DeJoy proposed to close numerous mail processing facilities, eliminate jobs, reduce post office hours of service, and cut the standard of delivering our first-class mail from 3 days to 5. Oh, also raise stamp prices. This is Jim Hightower saying delivering lousy service at higher prices is intended to destroy public support, opening up the service to takeover by private profiteers. And who gets joy from that? The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by our new Lowdown Happy Hour, now live streaming on Facebook from the Chat and Chew Cafe. With kick-ass political spark plugs like Beto O'Rourke, musical champions like Marcia Ball, and grassroots change makers like the New Georgia Project and People's Action, the Lowdown Happy Hour is reaching out to you to help put the move in movement. So grab a libation and join the fun. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Can we agree that the North won the Civil War?
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
And while we're on common ground, can we also agree that the Union was saved, that Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, that slavery was a horrifying institution, and that we shouldn't venerate historical figures who lived to perpetuate a system that treated human beings as less than human and as disposable property? Throughout the South, beginning about 130 years ago, statues were erected in public places to celebrate the Confederacy as if it were a noble cause, as if it had won the Civil War. In recent years, some of those statues have been removed from public squares. One of the largest was a 21-foot-high likeness of Confederate General Robert E. Lee that stood atop a granite pedestal twice that height in a major traffic circle in Richmond, Virginia, which was the capital of the Confederacy. It was removed only in September 2021. Confederate war hero statues are a celebration of white supremacy. Sadly, most of them still remain. Throughout the South, there are over 700 of these monuments. That's just wrong. Our public squares belong to everyone. They should be places where we celebrate democracy and freedom and equality, and not Civil War generals who fought to perpetuate slavery.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day that the Industrial Workers of the World Union was banned in Canada. The Industrial Workers of the World Union had grown steadily in Canada, reaching as many as 10,000 members by 1911. The union was especially strong in mining, logging, and the textile industry. But backlash against the radical union was mounting in the United States and in Canada. Swept up in Red Scare hysteria, the governments of both nations targeted the IWW. With the beginning of World War I, labor unions that dared to threaten strikes or to speak out against militarization were met with harsh reprisals. By 1914, the Canadian IWW had less than 1,000 members. In May of 1918, 18 Canadian IWW leaders were arrested while they attended a meeting in Ottawa. Those arrested were immigrants and were sent to a labor internment camp. Then the Canadian government moved to ban the organization altogether. The ban against the IWW would last until the end of World War I. Those found to be affiliated with the union faced up to 5 years in prison. 13 other organizations were also banned in Canada, including the Chinese Labor Association and the Social Labor Party. The act further read that it was illegal to attend meetings, except religious services, during the present war at which the proceedings are conducted in the language of any country with which Canada is at war, or in the languages of Russia, Ukraine, or Finland. After the war, the IWW was once again allowed in Canada and slowly began to rebuild. But the scars inflicted during the war years took a lasting toll on the union's membership. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, almost back from COVID. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley in southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 57 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-90s, winds light and variable and sunny throughout the day, clear skies overnight with lows in the upper 50s. Winds will remain light and variable with sunny skies tomorrow, and highs near 90. Winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and we are looking to have copious amounts of rain Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We look forward to that. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon, which include my mother and I now, stands at 212,046, and the deceased have increased perilously more to 264 so far. Neither my mother and I are part of that number. We don't want to be either. Ragweed pollen is rated moderate right outside the window here in Rogue River. The air quality index is good at 26 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at another fall level of 5. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.97 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 84%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations and a crowd sources from around the world. London is 72 and fair. Paris is 71 and sunny. Rome is 80 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 53 degrees with a light rain shower. Kabul is 71 and clear. Hong Kong is 81 and fair. Tokyo is 77 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and partly cloudy. And New York, New York is 64 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Associated Press staff brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Mexico has so many drug lords to deal with that critics openly wondered why the government has instead sought to lock up 31 academics, professors, and scientists in the country's harshest maximum security prison. The government of President Obrador has charged the university professors with violating a law that prevents members of an advisory board from receiving money from a government science fund. But that law was passed in 2019, and the scientists got the $2.5 million years earlier when it was legal. The money was meant to be used to promote scientific discussions, and those involved have denied the funds were illegal or misused. A judge at the Altiplano prison denied prosecutors' request for arrest warrants against the academics on Wednesday, but the whole episode lent heft to accusations that Obrador's government has sought to politicize academic life in Mexico.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Renata Brito and Barry Hatton of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The advance of lava from a volcanic eruption on one of Spain's Canary Islands has slowed significantly, raising fears that the molten rock might fan out further in coming days and wreak more destruction instead of just flowing out into the sea. One giant river of lava, 2,000 feet wide, slowed to 13 feet per hour after reaching a plain on Wednesday. On Monday, a day after the eruption on La Palma, it was moving about 2,300 feet per hour. A second stream of lava has virtually ground to a halt. It won't reach the Atlantic Ocean before the weekend, with some scientists saying it might not ever reach the sea. Seismic activity on La Palma Island was now low, but molten rock is still being thrown out of the volcano, 26 million cubic meters so far. A volcanologist at Spain's National Geographic Institute said the dynamics of any eruption were in constant flux. The uncertainty left many residents on the western side of the island of 85,000 people in limbo. Scientists say the lava flows could last for weeks or months. And in some places, the lava has grown thicker. It's 50 feet high in some places and now covers about 410 acres and has swallowed up around 350 homes. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, such as it was, but we'll be here on Monday for we'll be here for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. We'll meet up here on Monday. right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.